John Grisham, move over. My guest today, Noel Caraccio, is close at your heels. Noel has an active Mamaroneck-based law practice and has just published her second novel, Shattered City. It's a gripping read. I'm Alice Bloom. This is A Town in Village 2. Welcome back. Noel, thank you so much for being my guest today. Now, Shattered City. This was a gripping read. What inspired you to write it?
I had the idea all along of the Peter, Paul, and Mary song, Leaving on a Jet Plane.
Right.
That who were the people? Who were they leaving? Where were they going? Who were they coming back to? And that was the original idea of having a number of characters come together in one place. So I had to get them to one place.
Let's bring our viewers along, because they haven't read the book. Of course, you've been immersed in it for quite a while, and I just finished the book. It's about characters of very different professions who wind up in New York City at a pivotal moment in time. What happens?
I would say the three main characters, one is an attorney, one is a transplant surgeon, one is running a political campaign, and they end up in New York City at the same time, at the precise time that dirty bombs go off in New York City. So they are trapped together. And then there's some minor characters who are there as well. They're trapped together, and how are they going to survive this? Are they going to work together? Is it going to become anarchy? Is it going to become like Lord of the Flies? So what's going to happen? And so that was the initial idea, to get these people together in one place and then see what happens with the relationships.
Okay, now a dirty bomb. I have to tell you, that's a pretty terrifying prospect. Is that something that keeps you up at night?
Well, certainly we live very close to New York City, and I go into New York City for business. I go into New York City to the courts. I go into New York City for the Yankee game. We're going on Thursday night. So yeah, it is. It is. I know there's a lot of counterterrorism measures, but they have to be right 100% of the time.
I mean, certainly dirty bombs have been used in a lot of television shows, Madam Secretary and others. Are you affected by that? I mean, do you feel it's an imminent danger?
I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but certainly when we have these terrorist attacks, it crosses your mind, and especially because we're so close to New York City.
Yeah. So I kind of felt that you were maybe working something out, expressing your fears, maybe with some superstitious belief that maybe it won't happen if you write about it.
Honestly, I wouldn't say that, but
okay.
But I do think that it's an ever-present threat, and it's certainly ongoing. And we don't live in Wyoming. We live in a suburb of New York City, and you live in the city, I believe. So even some of my clients in New York City who've read the book say, we think about it.
It's always on your mind and on a lot of people's mind. I guess a lot of us put it in the back of our minds because we have to go on.
That's right.
We have to go on.
We have to live our lives.
Oh my gosh. So what was your inspiration was the Peter, Paul, and Mary song. Did you have to do a lot of research about dirty bombs and about?
I did some. There are some people who say they would have wanted more detail about the dirty bombs. That wasn't my point. My point was the relationships and what was going to happen with these people and how would they survive, if at all. And if you were one of those characters, what would you do? Now, in the book, I made up that technique about the scrubbing the organic compound.
Right.
That was just purely made up from whole cloth.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I sort of wondered whether that was real or not.
I figured I might have the Department of Defense knocking on my door saying, how did you get this secret, but I made that up. I made that up because one of the people who read the book early on said to me, New York City is a character in this book as well.
Yes.
And the survival of New York City. So is this technique to clean the air going to work, or is it going to be a disaster and New York City will ultimately become a ghost town?
Well, we hope that it works. I mean, but have you sent the book to DOD?
Not yet. As I said, I'm surprised they haven't knocked on the door yet.
I also thought it was optimistic. I mean, I would hope that there are methods to scrub the air and cleanse the city should ever something like this happen. However, I don't have the same confidence that perhaps you do.
It's a novel. That's the first thing.
Novel.
It's a novel. And I also know that there are, from reading the newspapers, watching the news on television, there are a lot of counterterrorism measures in effect. I know that there are detections all over the city. I don't know what exactly you call them, but there are detectors
Right.
that are set to go off and alert NYPD and Homeland and all that if a certain level of radiation is detected. So there's a lot of sophisticated things going on. But that wasn't my point.
But you didn't contact the city or any terrorist agencies to try to get some insight?
I did some research. I did some research, but my focus was more on the characters. That was, I mean, New York City, as I said, somebody said to me, is a character in the book, and it is. But the fact that the bombs went off, now what do we do? That's what I was moving toward in my thinking.
Now, your characters come together in a very unusual situation. They all happen to be renting temporary apartments in a very high-end, classy, luxury building that happens to have attendants. I mean, obviously, things sort of fall apart when a catastrophe like this happens. But they all come together, and they all happen to be in the same building. Let's talk a little bit about the characters. Now, lawyers, I figure you know a lot about.
Correct.
That's your livelihood, and you spend a lot of time in courts with a lot of colleagues, lawyers. But you had a transplant surgeon. Now, what do you know about transplant surgeons?
Not very much. Not very much. I wanted it to be people from different walks of life with different perspectives on things. Maybe the main character, Valerie, who's the attorney, is a little tougher. Maybe she's a little more antagonistic. She does a lot of trial work. And maybe the transplant surgeon is a little calmer, a little softer, has a different view of things. And the third character, I've gotten a lot of feedback. People don't like him, and you're not supposed to like him. He's a little bit egocentric. It's all about him. It's all about what you can do for him.
He's the man who runs a political campaign.
He's the one who runs the political campaign. Even his interaction at the beginning with the doorman, he doesn't even know the doorman's name.
Right.
So it's all about him and what you can do for him. So there were three kind of opposing views there, and how would they work that out? And not to give away anything, but ironically, at the end of the story, Paul, who is the campaign manager, ends up being friends and keeps in touch and helps the doorman.
Well, he mellows a little bit.
He does mellow a little bit. And I don't want to give away this part of the story, but he does something very good for Valerie toward the end of the story, where he puts himself in jeopardy. And I thought that was kind of a growth of the character.
Right. Well, it wasn't something we would have expected from him. So you're exactly right. I mean, he's a very egocentric individual who doesn't seem to be taking in the severity of what's going on, or feels he can overcome it.
And he looks at it as an opportunistic thing for his candidate.
Yes.
The candidate says this is a cataclysm of epic proportions, and he says, yeah, but we can think how we can turn this around to help you.
Right. Right. Well, that sounds a little bit like our political climate these days.
Could be.
Everything's sort of self-motivated. How does the political climate these days affect you in writing your books? I mean, do you find this book is not political?
No, this book is not political, and it was written in the spring of 2016 and the fall of 2016, before the actual election took place.
Okay.
So the fact, I suppose, there was something that made me say make the third character be related to a political campaign, but I made the candidate a former governor of Florida.
Right.
I wasn't trying to make him into any of the candidates that were running at that time.
Okay.
Because I think when I started the book, I don't even think we had a definitive Republican candidate at that point.
Right. Well, things were still emerging.
There were like 16 to start out with or something. Yeah.
Right, something like that. Yes, it was an adventure for sure. But let's get back to the characters. I thought that some of the writing about the lawyers was hysterical. Now, tell me about, I mean, again, I'm reluctant to give away everything that's happened, but there were some very funny experiences. One of the lawyers who winds up in the apartment, but just by accident, is a colleague of Valerie's.
Right,
okay.
He's one of her partners in the law firm.
Was he her partner, or she came to do some special project in New York?
It was a big law firm that had offices, presumably in New York and California.
Right.
The client wants her to come and do the litigation.
That's right.
Out of the New York office, because that's where the venue of the lawsuit is. And this one character, Brendan, I call him every man whom the fickle finger of fate keeps pointing to. He's bumbling, right?
Right.
He's, you know, he falls into the jury box. Is that what you're talking about? Or the donuts?
There were so many
donuts?
things.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, falling into the jury box. I mean, people trip sometimes, but this seemed like a prat. I mean, he was actually, it seemed like a comedy routine. Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen something like that happen?
I actually took I took part of that story from a friend of mine who's an attorney in Greenwich. And if he watches this, he'll love to hear this. But he told me this story many years ago. He was a trial attorney, and his opponent went to sort of schmooze with the jurors and kind of cozy up and sit on the edge of the jury box, and he fell in. Now, in New York, you pretty much stay at a podium. They don't let you wander around the room as much. So that is based on a true story, and I added to it. Okay. And then the story with him when he first meets Valerie. This is Brendan first meeting Valerie with the mess on the desk. Is that what you thought was funny?
Well, that was pretty funny too. I mean, he goes to have a donut and winds up spraying powder all over her papers, her desk, or her office. I mean, I could see somebody spills his coffee or drops a donut. I mean, these things happen, but this was almost like a comedy routine. But then the one that affected me the most was where he loses a piece of his pen or something like that in court, and it flies off and hits the judge in the eye, scratches the judge's cornea.
Yeah.
Not a good way to curry favor with the judge.
Nope. Sometimes you ask to approach the bench.
Yes.
The judge lets you come up, and they were probably arguing some point, and he moved his hand, and the ink sprayed all over the judge, and then part of the pen went up and hit the judge in the eye. I mean, has I ever had that happen? No.
Has that ever happened to anybody you know?
No.
Okay,
no.
So that was
a lot of this is. As you write, at least as I write, things come to me. Okay, I start writing about the character, and I will tell you the story. The publisher calls them. There's two kinds of writers. There's the pantsers and the plotters. The pantsers are the ones who sit down and write, and just let the characters and the story go where it's going to go. The plotters are the people who have the whole outline done before they put one word on the computer, and they have everything done, and that's how they write. Now, I don't know if you recall, we told you when we wrote Secrets Change Everything, which is the first novel, that we had no outline, and I swore to myself I was never going to write another novel without having an outline. And what did I do? I wrote this novel without an outline. It just seems to me that the characters tell you what to do as you're going along.
Well, I wonder what other writers say. I mean, it works. I mean, one of my questions for you was going to be how much plotting, if that's the word you use, or scripting do you do before you actually write? Because the characters seem well drawn.
Thank you.
And they came together, and I said, well, no, she couldn't have written that right off the cuff. I mean, maybe, one character, especially the woman lawyer, I mean, that one I could see you having tremendous affinity for, and that could evolve from your imagination. But the other characters are not in your purview or not close to you. You had to have thought about it.
And they have a backstory. And
yes.
A number of people have told me they like the backstory of the characters. That Tom, who's the transplant surgeon, he's older than Valerie. He had a wife who died of cancer, and that deeply affected him. That he was a doctor and he couldn't save her. No, they're all made up. I knew I needed at least 3 main characters, and then there was sort of the 2 more minor characters, like Brendan, who's the attorney, the everyman in a dark blue suit,
right.
and somewhat the doorman, somewhat the doorman. But no, I knew I needed characters, and I wanted them to have diverse backgrounds so that they would have diverse opinions and diverse ways of looking at things. And then I've also gotten a lot of good feedback about the 2 Saudi Arabian young men, that they were not bad guys. They were caught in the grist mill of what happened in their lives, what happened with their lives. People liked them.
You found them sympathetic.
I found them sympathetic.
Now, when you say people like them, who do you give your book to read? I mean, is this from, there aren't polls done? Or?
Well, what happens is I have email lists from the prior book. Mm-hmm. I have my own email list of my clients, my friends. So when the book came out, we sent out the announcement. I know a lot of people have bought the book, but I don't have a lot of reviews on Amazon, which I need to get people to do more of. Okay. But sometimes people will call me and email me. I'm in the midst of reading it and I'm loving it. I can't put it down. Uh-huh. I hate you because I read till 12 o'clock last night and I had to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And when I do talk to people about it, I want to know who they like, what they like, which characters they like the best.
Now, this book, Shattered City, is very different from your first book, Secrets
Yes.
Change Everything. Very different.
Yes.
The characters are different, the whole plot is different, and there's a tension in this book. I belong to an international crime book club.
Okay.
Now, which is the genre I happen to like, and this doesn't qualify for our book club because we happen to be visiting the whole world, so we tend to stray from New York City. However, for people who like the genre, that is very much it's a very good example of that genre, better than most books that we read, because very often you don't get the backstories on the characters, and they're kind of stick figures, put in place to make something happen. So this is better. But Secrets Change Everything was a much more a woman's book, I would say.
Really?
I thought so.
Interesting. A woman's book.
Well, something that, I couldn't recommend it to my husband. He wouldn't relate to the characters the same way or the story. Whereas Shattered City, I'll say to him, okay, I'm done with it, you can read this.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you were saying that you couldn't recommend Shattered City to your husband.
Oh. No, that he'd embrace immediately. But Secrets Change Everything, he'd say, that's not my book.
Maybe not. There were more, the main characters were more women, although Rick, who was the attorney who tried to commit suicide, that had the bond with them.
Right.
But it might have been.
But there isn't the same tension, the same kind of drama that I felt anyway in that book. They're very good books, but very different. Now, you're working on a sequel to Secrets Change Everything. Are you working on a sequel to Shattered City?
What's interesting is that I have 2 very good friends who are former English teachers, retired English teachers, and both chairpersons of their respective English departments, who said to me, well, we can see you left clues here for the sequel. Now, honestly, I hadn't thought about it, but when we were discussing it, I said, yes, I guess I did. I left some characters with things that could be picked up, those threads. The bad guy, Wally.
Right.
He could be, we didn't kill him off.
No.
We didn't kill him off. That's the other thing I learned from Secrets Change Everything is you have to be careful who you kill off because in Secrets Change Everything we killed off that attorney Danielle and people liked her. People were like, why'd you kill her off?
Well, don't people do focus groups, or don't publishers do focus groups to see? They do it for films. Do they do it for books as well to see?
You'd have to be as far as I know, you have to be somebody like Nelson DeMille.
Okay.
Authors who are first-time or second-time authors, unless you start, selling millions of copies. The publishers are happy to publish, but they don't do any of the marketing or any of that.
Well, there are some clever ways to bring a character back to life. I mean, it has happened
It has
before.
happened. It has happened, and some of the television shows you see it happening with. But it was interesting because the publisher said to me after she read the manuscript, you have to. She said, you're leaving too many things hanging, and I thought what I was doing was sort of leaving suspense and let people decide what happened themselves. And she said, your readers are going to be unhappy. They want to know what happens to these characters if they like them.
Now, that brings me to another question. I get a lot of books sent to me, and some of them are self-published, which is fine. And some, I hope they succeed. A lot of them are very good. How does one go about getting a publisher these days?
Well, the first book was self-published. We went through Amazon, their Create Space, and it was good. This Secrets Change Everything has been picked up now by Balboa Press. So they picked it up. We had hoped they would do more marketing than they did, but they picked it up nonetheless. And with Shattered City, it was really fortuitous. I went to School of the Holy Child in Rye for high school.
Okay.
And I was an active alumna. I was on the board there for a number of years. And one of the reunions, which was not my class reunion year, they did a panel of graduates who did interesting and exciting things. And I see this panel, and I look at it, and it was somebody who was 3 years ahead of me, who has a small publishing firm in Massachusetts. And I emailed her, and I said, Linda, I don't know if you remember me. And she has a publishing firm. She's going to love it. I'm giving her a little plug here.
Okay.
It's called Bella Storia Press. Mm-hmm. And she did remember me. And I said, we wrote this first novel, and I'm interested in talking to you. And we had several lengthy conversations. She read the first novel. She liked it. And then I said, I'm thinking about doing a second one. And I gave her the general idea. She said, yeah, I'm interested in it. So it was just fortuitous. It was fortuitous.
Because most authors these days have a real hard time getting anyone to even read their treatment or first couple of chapters.
Correct.
And
she also recommended a very good editor. For Secrets Change Everything, we went through an editor at Create Space who was good, but she recommended an editor in New York City who was terrific. And it took me, after I looked at the edit from her, it took me 2 months to
make the changes. Were you resistant, or did you find that you saw the wisdom of her suggestions?
For example, both the publisher and the editor wanted the dirty bomb to go off earlier in the book. I was sort of building to it, and so it went off about 40 pages sooner than I had it, which created a lot of extra work because you have to go back and make sure that everything fits. You're not talking about a character that hasn't been introduced yet, and that sort of thing.
Right, and make sure that you've got your ducks in a row, that there are no inconsistencies.
Yep.
Noel, we've been talking a lot about editing, which of course is a vital piece of the puzzle in any well-written book. A lot of people don't realize that, but I think we all know that you may be a great writer, but even the greatest writers have a great editor. Books are different in that the first book, Secrets Change Everything, you wrote with a collaborator or a partner. Shattered City, you wrote on your own. What's the difference in creating them?
Well, Secrets Change Everything was the first book I had ever written. And when I worked with my friend Maggie, what we did was she had the idea of a lot of the storyline. We would talk about it, and then I would write. And then we would get together, go over what I had written, and edit, change, delete, change some things, and so it took a little bit longer to do it that way. And it was interesting because I felt I had a safety net. With Shattered City, when I wrote it by myself, I was scared because you're putting yourself out there, and I really didn't know if it was good or people would like it. at least here I had somebody else's feedback on it. We were working together. Here, I'm thinking, maybe it's really not very good. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And one of the interesting things too is if you look, and this was the suggestion of the editor, there are chapter headings, not all the way through, not every chapter, but it says like chapter 17, DB minus 48 minutes. That
dirty
means
bomb,
dirty bomb.
Right.
And then DB plus 38 minutes or 48 minutes. And people kind of like that.
Well, I like things like that because anything that helps direct me and keep me on track is a good thing to have. A lot of us read late at night and we sort of drift off, so it's kind of nice to pick up again and know where we are. It's very interesting. But I wonder, do most writers let people read a few chapters before they've completed a book?
I don't know.
Feedback?
Honestly, don't know. I know what we did with the two of us. This one I pretty much had it done before anybody else read it. This one also, it was a challenge for me because I had 3 different main characters, and I felt I needed to keep the balls in the air.
Yes, and you did.
Thank you. It wasn't like, well, I write one chapter about Valerie, one chapter about Tom, one chapter about Paul. But I needed to have some consistency, and I needed to, for example, I needed to get all 3 of them to New York. I needed to have them meet each other.
Right.
I needed to have something happen, and where were they when the dirty bomb went off? For example, since Tom was a transplant surgeon, it would have been logical for him to have been in the hospital. Why wasn't he in the hospital when the dirty bomb went off?
Right.
Well, he was homesick.
Right. Well, you handled that just great. So I feel like you took care of those kind of details.
Thank you.
It didn't falter for that. Because sometimes I wonder if you have a collaborator, if you're each telling each other the same things, or you're both so immersed, you still don't have that objective view of reading it and saying, wait, something doesn't work, or something.
Well, I think there was some that, I think sometimes Maggie would say to me, no, I don't like this. I don't like this. And we'd fight about it. Sometimes we fought about words. I don't like this word. She did not like the word acquiesce. We fought over that word.
How long did it take you to write Secrets, Change Everything?
Oh, it took us about 9-10 months, I think.
And Shattered City was?
Shattered City was less than 5.
Okay, so on your own, you did.
I did a little faster,
a little more expediently. So when will the sequel to Secrets, Change Everything be ready?
Probably closer to a year.
Oh, okay. So we'll keep a date open.
Keep a date open, yes, please.
So we can talk.
Because we have to edit it ourselves. Then it has to go to the professional editor and the publisher.
Of course, it always takes longer than we think. Well, best of luck with Shattered City. I have a feeling that with a little bit of promotion, it can do quite well.
Thank you.
And I think there's a sequel in your future for that one as well.
I think there is too, actually.
Well,
yes.
thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
It's been my
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
And to you at home, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.